My mother was a waitress, and my father was a boiler operator at Clarence Dock Power Station. He had been in the Royal Navy for 8 years and served in the Korean War and came back in '53. It was the three of us together I really enjoyed. Something happened which changed everything really when I was about 4. My mother worked with her mother. Her mother, my grandmother, was a very, very brilliant woman. She ended up running her own restaurant, which for a woman from that background was quite extraordinary. And she wanted to have November the 5th off with her adored grandson, yours truly, because it's bonfire night, Guy Fawkes night. So she changed her night off and she worked on November the 3rd. And fatefully, she accepted a lift from someone who worked with her, a young woman whose husband was a cab driver. And he turned up and offered her a lift home. Unbeknownst to her, he'd been drinking. He shot a red light on Everton Valley and was hit by a bus. And so she was killed, the driver was killed, and I think the woman, the wife, survived. So I remember, I do have a vague memory of my mother going downhill after that. And her drinking really took off. And my dad also, drank a lot. My dad could hold his drink. My mother couldn't hold a drink. After a couple of gin and tonics and a couple of glasses of cider, she was gone, And I remember as a kid, I'd watch her at parties, and I'd watch that moment when the eyes would slightly droop, and I knew that she was then intoxicated. And so that was an issue growing up, there's no question. I kind of was good at school, so I was cracking on with school, and I found a teacher there called Douglas Cashin. This is the Liverpool Comprehensive, and I was quite good at French. And in my second year, a Latin teacher called Douglas Cashin said, "You should go into the Latin group." So I went to the Latin group, and at the end of that year, he said, "You should do ancient Greek." I thought, wow, why would I do ancient Greek? He said, "Well, you'll have to give up geography and chemistry." So yeah, I said, "You had me at geography. I hate both those subjects. I'll do ancient Greek." And I was really good at these subjects. And it became apparent that this teacher had got his eye on 2 or 3 boys he thought would be part of his Cambridge set. So don't forget, this is the Liverpool Comprehensive in the 1960s, and they're sending young boys off to really good Russell Group universities, and they send an even smaller number off to Oxbridge. Every year this happened. Cut to now, the same school, I'm still involved with it, sends very few kids to those kind of places and sends nobody to Oxbridge. It's got the highest truancy rate in the city. It's a school that's now on a list of failing schools. As a country, we've gone backwards in terms of opportunity for working class kids in these areas. So this guy, Mr. Cashin, he decides to drive us down to Cambridge to see a play. And every 3 years, the people studying what they call classics, Latin, ancient Greek, ancient history, at Cambridge, every year they put on a play in ancient Greek. Went to see it. It wasn't really funny. It was just pretty bad. And but apart from the play, I wandered around Cambridge, and I said to my mate David Hughes, "I can't believe this place. It's like a film set." I said to Mr. Cashin in the car going back, we're in the van, the school bus. I said, how do you get there? He said, "Well, Mulville," he looked in his rearview mirror at me. He said, "Mulville, if you work really hard, I'll help you." He said, you might get there. So it became my obsession. Dave and I were obsessed with getting to Cambridge. In the meantime, I'd been in a school play. I was desperate to be in school plays. I had a very bad stammer as a child, a really, really bad stammer. And when I was in a school play, I didn't stammer. So, I'd be in these school plays. And one school play, Androcles and the Lion, we had to ship some girls in from St. Mary's. And it was like we'd never seen girls before. They were marched through the school, and we were like howling like wolves. It's ridiculous. Anyway, so we started rehearsing with them, and I really fancied one of the girls who was playing the Christian women. And she quite liked me. And in the end, we started going out together, Julia. And we kind of became boyfriend and girlfriend. So I had Dave, my best friend, and my girlfriend, and the three of us, we hung out together. And I kind of realised that, that I was going to go to Cambridge. And I suppose, if I'm honest, I wanted to end the relationship and go to Cambridge. But I didn't know how to end the relationship. And, having done thousands of hours of therapy, I can now tell you with great certainty why I did that. But at the time, my mother loved me and I loved her, but she was prone to becoming very upset quickly and very hysterical about things, very anxious. And so growing up as a kid, clearly I learned how to keep my mum calm, So I wouldn't try and upset her, because sometimes she'd drink and then things would get bad at home. And I went round to see her, and I suppose I wanted to end the relationship. If I'm honest, I wanted to end the relationship. But as I broached the subject of me going away to Cambridge, we're only 18 years of age, and I could see she's getting more and more upset. And I said, so I really think it's probably the right thing that we get married. And I thought, who said that? Who said that? Who just said that? Oh, that was me. I said that. She goes, oh my God. Goes in and tells her mum. And mum comes in 5 minutes later and goes, Auntie Edie's going to buy you a fridge. Or when someone's buying a fridge, you're f***ed. We got white goods now on the wedding list. We got a wedding list on the go, and things. I then go home and tell my mum and dad, who quite rightly hit the roof. And then they work on me, and then it becomes something else then. Because I'm an arrogant son of a bitch. I'm 18. I know everything. It becomes a power struggle between me and my dad. Oh, I got married in a church in front of 250 people, aged 19 years of age, a week before I went to Cambridge University. My dad outside the church said, listen, lad, he said, get yourself to the airport, go and hide in Ireland for a while. I'll explain to these people. There's like 250 people in the church. And we went to Cambridge. And, I lived the life of a student, and she got a job. And, I behaved myself in terms of, sexually I behaved myself. I kept falling in love with other people, didn't know anything about it. But, I just knew it wasn't working out. I just knew this was... But at Cambridge, I got through by being belligerent and aggressive and funny sometimes. But someone said to me, you can make good morning sound like a declaration of war. So I was defended, and I was ready, on the balls of my feet. And that is also partly being brought up in that neighbourhood, is that good morning in my house was often, what's wrong with your face? So it's a bluntness of communication. So people were a bit wary of me. And then I found my tribe. I like football. I was in the football team at Jesus College. I met a bunch of mates. I then wanted to be an actor. So I turned up to the ADC Theatre, the Amateur Dramatic Club Theatre in Cambridge. It's a professionally run theatre for the students. It's an amazing place. And Ian McKellen went through there, Trevor Nunn, all these great people went through. And I'm in there. It's my first week at Cambridge, and I'm sitting there in the audience. And on stage is the president of the club. He's a third year, a man called Anthony Root, who then went on to be quite senior in the television business as a second year representative. But there are 2 first year representatives on stage. I mean, how did they manage to get within days on stage at the ADC? One was called Peter Bennett-Jones, who went on to run Tiger Aspect Productions and became Rowan Atkinson's manager. The other was Nicholas Heitner, who became Sir Nicholas Heitner, artistic director of the National Theatre, and now runs the Bridge Theatre. He was a brilliant director at Cambridge, and now obviously is a renowned director, international director. But also what I noticed was that they were both privately educated. They had the confidence of young people who had been privately educated. And when I go and talk to schools, state schools, what I notice is there's, in some schools anyway, that the young people don't have that kind of confidence, that self-belief. I was too nervous to audition in the end, I became very crippled with anxiety in my first year. And I tried to be in the Footlights because I wanted to be a comedy actor. And I auditioned for the Footlights, didn't really get anywhere there. Clive Anderson was the president. And I always remind him now how rude he was when I tried to audition. He didn't even look up from his crossword. And he's a very good friend of mine now. So what happened was at the end of my first year, the door... by the way, I'm not living in college because I'm married. But they found me a flat, a fantastic Georgian flat for £2 a week. And there's a knock on the door, and this guy opened the door, and this guy, very posh, says, "I'm looking for Jimmy Mulville." Who's looking for him? From where I'm from, you don't own up to those things immediately. So they might want money, right? I said, "Who wants him?" I said, "My name's Stephen Alexander. I'm Emmanuel, and his friend David Hughes is a friend of mine. I'm looking for somebody with an authentic Liverpool accent, and I need him for my play. I'm doing a play that's written by The Scaffold, which was a Liverpool group, and Roger McGough, the poet, John Gorman, and Mike McGeer, who was the brother of Paul McCartney. And they wrote this play called The Puny Little Life Show, which is a sketch show." I said, "Oh no, that's me. I'm Jimmy Mulville." He said, "Well, do you want to be in the play?" I said, "Yeah." So I did the play, and in the play there's a monologue that John Gorman does, dressed as a vicar, and it's a vicar that gets all the parables wrong. So it's quite a funny monologue. And somebody's in the audience called Charlie Shaughnessy, who was an old Etonian at Cambridge. His dad, Alfred Shaughnessy, had written Upstairs, Downstairs. And he came backstage, and he's lovely, Charlie. And he said, "I'm so enjoyed your performance. I wonder, can I offer you a part? I've been given the production next year, in the first week of our second year, at the ADC. It's called The Entertainer, written by John Osborne. It's about a stand-up comedian, Archie Rice, who's seen better days. I wonder whether you'd like to play that." I went, "Yes, I would." So I did this part, Archie Rice. And the president of Footlights, Chris Keatley, was in the audience. And the production wasn't great, but it was a good part. And he said to me, "Would like you to be in Footlights." It was really funny. So I then joined Footlights. I was in the Footlights Review in 1976, which was written and directed by Douglas Adams, who then went on to do Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And then the following year, I was made president of Footlights. And I worked with Rory McGrath, who was my partner in crime, and he and I were a couple of northern thugs who took over the Footlights, and we put on these concerts, and we then did a review at the end of the year called Tag, which was then directed by Griff Rhys-Jones. And in those days, Griff Rhys-Jones was a brilliant student director, and everybody thought he'd go into directing. In fact, he was equally talented as an actor, and then became an actor and became a very well-known actor. And that show was very successful. Went to the Edinburgh Festival. The BBC picked up on it and put it on television. So I got an indication that actually there may be a route here that I can follow. I then didn't have a job, and I didn't get a job. I wrote to every theatre in the country, for a job, sweeping the floors, and I got one reply. Of the 70 letters I wrote, I got one reply from the Marlow Theatre, Canterbury, saying no. And then Dave Hughes, my old friend, my great friend, rang up and said, "Listen, we're renting a house in Catford. There's a spare room. Do you want it? 10 quid a week?" I thought, yeah, I'll better go and stay in Catford. I had no money. My mum and dad couldn't afford to give me any money, so I couldn't ask them for money. But they hated the fact no one signed on in my family. We were workers, and my mum and dad would say, "You work, Jimmy, or you want. You work or you want." And they would go to work with massive hangovers. I mean, I've seen them completely stocious the night before. They get up and they go to work. So I thought, I'm going to sign on. I'm not going to tell them. So I went down to the job exchange in Catford. I stood in a long line. I thought, here I am, out of Cambridge University. I haven't got a job. And I got to the end of the line, and the woman said, "What kind of work are you looking for?" I said, "Well, ideally, I'd like to be a film star." She said, "Yeah, there's not much call for that in Catford. They need porters in Lewisham Hospital." I said, "Okay, I'll have that." So I became a porter in Lewisham Hospital for about 6 months, which I really enjoyed. And then on May the 9th in 1978, I got a phone call. And it was my father-in-law, Bert, with whom I had an interesting relationship. I liked him, but it was a difficult relationship. And he was a very, very private man. And why is he calling me? The year before, I should tell you that when I took my final degree at Cambridge, I was ringing home every night, and my mum was answering the phone, and my dad was never there. He was always at work, working 2 shifts. He was out. Then the final exam I took of my finals, I rang up, I had a bottle of champagne, I was in very high spirits, said, "Mum, I'll never take another exam." No, she burst into tears. I said, what's happened? He said, your dad's ill, he's in hospital. But he told me not to tell you while you were taking your exams. Then on May the 9th, I got a phone call from Bert saying, I'm really sorry to say your dad's died. And I said immediately, did he kill himself? Because the illness he had was never going to kill him. Eventually, it would have made him bedridden and he would have become an invalid, a complete invalid. But he obviously became very depressed and had lost his identity. And he hanged himself with a piece of electric wire. And this is on May the 9th. So I go home and I was really angry. And I couldn't really, I couldn't make sense. I couldn't get to the point. I couldn't get to the sadness because I was just so angry. And there's a shame involved as well. I mean, it's the thing about suicide is that they leave you with so many questions. Right? But that changed everything for me because what happened was I had a massive wake-up call. It was like I was being pushed through a plate glass window, and I ended my marriage.
Hi, and welcome to Deep.
We love making videos, meeting people and letting them tell their stories.
We really hope you're enjoying the channel, and if you are and would like a bit more,
We've just launched the series as a podcast on Spotify.
It's the full interviews uncut, so you can hear the whole thing, wherever you are, at home or on the go.
But no matter where you're watching the content, please remember to like, comment and subscribe as it really helps the channel.
And don't forget to drop a comment below and tell us who you'd like us to talk to next.
Thank you. Now, back to our story.
Okay, cool.
What happened to me was in that time, I was going to see Griff Rhys-Jones, who was working as a radio producer, and one night I had been to see one of his shows, and in the pub afterwards, the Captain's Cabin, I got into a row with an older bloke in his 40s with glasses and a suit about comedy in general. I had a few drinks and I was mouthing off, and the following day I went to see Griff again. And this guy pops out of an office. I think, oh, he works here. Griff said, "That's the boss. That's David Hatch. That you were having a go at." Oh, no. He said, "Do you want to come in for a minute?" I came in and I said, "Listen, if I said anything last night, I'm really sorry. I had a couple of drinks." He said, "No, it was interesting what you said." Yeah, you are a bit mouthy. He said, "But some of the things you said were interesting. I've got these bursary funds for new writers. I've given one to Rory McGrath, one of the best writers of his generation, and Guy Jenkin, who's also a good writer. We've got one spare. Would you like it? I'm a hospital porter. Do I want to write jokes for comedians on the radio? Boy, do I." So I take that job. I take that job soon after my dad's died. So it's a weird kind of pivot. Suddenly I'm now going into the West End and I'm hanging out with people who are on the radio. Some of them are on the telly and they're doing a radio show. I'm in a world now where I think, oh, this is the world I want to be in. And I fall in love with somebody. I'm 23. And for the first time, I fall in love as a kind of adult, if you like. And I realise that I can't administrate an affair and a marriage. And I start the affair. It feels terrible. So I say to Julia, I can't do this anymore, and I leave. And I don't tell her the real reason. And I never told her the real reason. And maybe I should have done to kind of let her hate me. But I didn't. I was a coward. And so I become a radio producer. And I get a flat at the back of a house in Willesden Green. And I'm very happy there. 1978, I go to the Edinburgh Festival to look for new shows. And I come across a show written by the Oxford Theatre Group called Radio T. These guys were now legitimately on commercial radio, Capital Radio, Radio London, all these different kind of radio stations. So this was a parody, this stage show was a parody written by Richard Curtis and Angus Deaton. And I was a young guy radio producer, and they had a song, a parody, written by Phil Pope of the Bee Gees. It's a fantastic song. So I go backstage, and I say to Angus Deaton, who's the leader of the troupe, a fantastic show. Do you think you could convert this into a radio show? Because I work in the radio, and this is about radio. It would make a great radio show. And he was interested. And I liked Angus enormously. So I brought them down to London. They were still at university, and we spent a year developing this show, and it became a show called Radioactive. And Radioactive won a Sony Award. And suddenly, I'm making a show that's doing well. But I don't really want to stay in the radio. We then put together a show which we perform in called Injury Time. And Injury Time is a sketch show that Rory McGrath and I wrote, Rory mainly, and Emma Thompson was in it, actually. We get a phone call from Ken Dodd, who was a brilliant comedian and a top comedian from Liverpool. And he rang up the BBC and said, I want to speak to these young men who've written the Injury Time. So I go and see Ken Dodd. Ken Dodd was a different kettle of fish. He was very, very monomaniacal about comedy. I mean, he was like a kind of scientifically obsessed with where things fitted. And he sat me down and he said, I listened to your very funny show driving up to the Conservative Party conference. He was a Conservative. He was a Liverpool Conservative. There are some. And he then recounted the whole sketch. He had a photographic memory of, in a way, he's one of those kind of savants. He listened to the sketch and he knew it. And he said, I need animal jokes. In the first 20 minutes of my act, I need animal jokes. He said, because they need to be funny, laugh out loud, simple jokes, because I need to remind the audience that I'm a comedian. And then I'll take them off into more surreal avenues. He said, I can't have my left kneecap talking to my right kneecap in the first 20 minutes of my show. But I thought it was a brilliant image that even a comedian who clearly had a huge career went on stage and thought, no, tonight I've got to remind them I'm funny before I take them off into a... And it taught me a lot about how you earn people's trust when you're doing comedy. You can't just assume that they think you're funny. You have to earn that right. And so what happened was we got poached, to cut a long story short, by Thames TV wanted to launch off into new comedy, because this is now the 80s we're in. It's now 81, 82, and new comedy is happening. They called it alternative comedy. And the Comedy Store was coming on stream. I was the first night at the Comedy Store with Clive Anderson. Clive Anderson and I did a double act and didn't get gonged off. But what happened was Thames TV decided to poach a little group of us to do a pilot. Now, I'm still working at the radio, and I'm making a show called Weekending, which is a brilliant show in many ways because anyone could write on it. It was an open-door policy that anyone could walk in on a Wednesday, sit in the writer's room and write jokes about the week's news. And if your joke or your sketch got on, you got a credit. So I was producing this show, and it was during the Falklands War, right? So your sketches had to be read by what was called the Secretariat at the BBC, which sounds a bit Soviet. I think it might be called editorial policy now. I call them head of program prevention, right? And they'd read it. They read all the sketches. Now, we did a sketch in it, which was a piss take of the Sun, because we hated the Sun. And the Sun, as you may remember, well, you won't remember, but you may be aware of, that the Belgrano was a ship that was sunk by our troops, and the Sun printed a picture of the ship going down with "Gotcha" on it. So we did a piss take of that article. It goes in the show. I listened to the show going out on a Friday night, 10:30, and it's not in the show. It's been taken out. I think that's bizarre. So I go and see Bobby J. Now, Bobby J is the new boss. David Hatch has moved on to greater things, and he was a brilliant boss. And Bobby J had stepped into his shoes, and he was a twat. But the truth is that he was a very unpleasant man. So anyway, I go in to see Bobby J on the Monday, and I say, I've just listened to the show going out, and someone took the sketch out about the Sun. Yes, he said, yes, I was listening to the show on Friday night with Alan King. Alan King, who was the head of HR. And he was a nice man, but, he liked to drink. And he was sitting there with Bobby J apparently on Friday night, and they were painting a picture for me that they were listening to the show I'd edited, and they had decided between them that this sketch should come out. And I said, why? He said, well, our boys are dying out there. I said, but so are their boys. And actually, this is a war crime. One day, this will be seen as a war crime. And anyway, we had a row. Now, I've been offered this job at Thames. So I'd like to tell you, this is a fantastic act of self-sacrifice, that I was actually going out on principle. And I said, I resign from this department, right? He went, no, he said, yeah, no, I'm not surprised. I'm just reading here, announcement from the Montreux Festival, Jimmy Gilbert at Thames Television, how thrilled he is you're joining him there. Good luck. Right. So I go off to Thames TV, and my TV career begins then. I'm now working on television. We do this pilot at Thames TV. It doesn't work for Thames, but I'm now dating a woman called Denise O'Donoghue. I met in 1980, 81? 80, officially 81, I think. And she's working as a producer for Holmes Associates, which was a independent production company making mainly factual programs, medical programs. And Denise said, give it to me, and I'll give it to Channel 4 because they're brand new. They might be interested in a bunch of young people doing a rude sketch show. So we tried to get the tape, and Thames wouldn't give us the tape. So Rory and I were late one night in the bar at Thames TV. We got a bit pissed. And we broke into Philip Jones's office. He was the head of comedy. And we ransacked his office and found the videotape and gave it to Denise. She gave it to Channel 4. She gave it to Mike Bolland, who's a brilliant controller of entertainment. And he said, yeah, I think this is really good. Let's get him in. And they commissioned a series. And we put this show on called Who Dares Wins. And it ran for 5 seasons. And Rory and I are writing partners. And we have this idea for a sitcom set in ancient Britain in the year 123 AD, which is Chelmsford 123. And so we pitched it to Channel 4. They liked it because we're both on Channel 4, so we're Channel 4 performers. And they commissioned it. And we go to Andrew Holmes and say we want to set up our own company. And he was very gracious about it. And he gave us an office in his building. And that's how Hat-Trick began. But I was still an actor and a writer in those days. And I continued that way. We did Chelmsford. I then got a part in a sitcom called That's Love. I did Alan Bleasdale shows. But along the way, I was also doing something else. I was going deeper and deeper and deeper into alcoholism and drug addiction. I've been producing Smith & Jones. It was called The Last Smith & Jones. I produced the second series. I was script edited the first series, second series. And Mel Smith and I became coke buddies. And poor old Mel died when he was 60. And he's a fantastic guy. But like me, he fell in love with nights on cocaine. If you're an addict and an alcoholic and you stop using alcohol and drugs, you feel worse. You feel terrible because it's a mental illness. And the alcohol and the drugs are not the symptoms. They are the cure. They are the medication you're using. It's the wrong medication. But for the time that I was doing it, I look back on it, I thank God, because it kind of got me through. Because I realized that after my dad's death, his suicide, I just hit the self-destruct button. It's not an excuse, but it certainly was a reason. And, as I say, I blew apart my marriage. I went heads down into my career, and I was doing quite well. Bizarrely, in 1988, when I eventually surrendered in 1988, I was doing a sitcom called That's Love with Humphrey Barclay. He's a fantastic producer and a very dear friend of mine. But I was supposed to do a day's filming. And, filming, you're there at 7 o'clock in the morning, you're ready to go. I woke up at 10 o'clock in the morning on a drug dealer's floor and looked at my watch. So I hid for the day. I was so ashamed of myself. And the following day I went to see Humphrey and I said, Humphrey, I'm really sorry. I think I'm a drug addict. And he said, thank you for being honest. He said, if this happens again, he said, I've worked with people with issues like you, like Peter Cook and Elaine Stritch. And he said, you're a nightmare. You've got to stop this. If it happens again, Jimmy, you'll be fired. And we're halfway through this production. And ITV will sue you. You're costing them money. I promised I'd never do it again. I love this job. I loved him. I didn't want to upset anybody. The following Wednesday, I did exactly the same thing. I woke up on a drug dealer's floor it wasn't a filming day. It was a rehearsal day. And rehearsal day started at 10. I woke up at 10. So I got into the rehearsal room at 10:45. I managed to get my shit together. But it frightened me so much that I rang the counsellor. She said, go to meetings, go to AA meetings and NA meetings. I said, no, I don't do meetings. I'm on television. And she said, oh, really? She said, oh, maybe I'll give you Anthony Hopkins' number or Barry Humphries' number because, they're on telly now and again. I mean, she was putting me very much in my place. I was doing a Channel 4 show that not many people watched. So, but I went to 3 meetings and I was taken by this very nice guy and on the fourth occasion, he didn't turn up because he thought, well, I've introduced him to meetings now. So I stopped going to meetings. I basically went to a meeting and I stopped going. And I lied because I was with Denise at the time, and she was saying, you've got to get yourself sorted out. This is a nightmare for me. So I basically then lied about going to meetings. I'd go and see movies. So I lasted for 6 months. They call white knuckling, where you're not getting any kind of support. You're just not drinking and not using. But it was like, that's all I could think about. I'm not going to drink. I'm not going to use. I'm not going to drink. I'm not going to use. I wasn't relaxed. I wasn't happy in my life. And after 6 months, we were asked to do a comic relief. The very first comic relief was 1988. And at the end of it, we had a party, because, in our business, you do a piece of work, you have to have a party. And at the party, a guy just nodded to me like that. He went, and in the nod, what I heard was, would you like to follow me to the toilet and do a line of cocaine? And I went, followed him, line of cocaine, came out, had 1 beer, went home and was fine. I thought, great, I have cracked it. I have not got a problem with alcohol or drugs. And 3 months later, I'm ringing Joyce Ditzler and saying, can I please come into your rehab? I can't do this anymore. And she said, I've been waiting for this call. So on December the 4th, the day after we did the final recording of That's Love, I went into Farm Place rehab. And I was there for 13 weeks. And from then on in, I've managed to stay clean and sober. That was 1988. And what you learn as you go on this course with different people is you share honestly with each other what's going on. It's actually there's also lots of humour in it. And I thought I was three years sober. My marriage, I think, at the time was in trouble, because that often happens when someone gets sober, the marriage actually struggles because people start changing. And one night I had a long, dark night of the soul, and I thought, as a boy, I wanted to be an actor. And I became an actor. And now, no longer a boy, I'm heading off into my middle age. And the boyhood dream, I have a fear might become a middle-aged fantasy, because am I going to be the kind of actor I wanted to be? Or am I going to be... Because, I just done a sitcom on ITV. I did a show on Channel 4. I did a part in GBH. But I had an inkling. There was a part of me which said, come on, be honest with yourself. Is this going to be the thing that's going to be in your 40s and 50s and 60s? And we'd set up Hattrick. So Hattrick had already been... It was 2 years into its existence. We were... this is like 1992 now. So we'd done Whose Line Is It Anyway? We'd done Have I Got News For You? Suddenly we were a company that was getting returning gigs, and a business was forming. It was run by Denise brilliantly. So I was thinking, actually, I began my life as a producer and a writer on radio. Maybe what I should do now is dedicate my life to doing that on television and give it my best shot. So I made a decision to give up acting in that moment. It was really painful, because it was like killing something off that I'd, for many years, thought that was my vocation. But I do say to my kids and to other young people is that, if you're no longer enjoying the journey, stop what you're doing. This idea that, that winners don't quit and quitters don't win, bullshit. If you get that instinct that it's wrong for you, change and do something else and find out where you're going. I've gone through many cycles at Hattrick. In 2006, we nearly went bankrupt. In the end, it all works out. That expression is, it'll be all right in the end. If it's not all right, it's not the end. And just keep going. Like you've seen the sign that we've got in the writer's room at Hattrick. It's a big graffiti sign saying, keep going. That's the only thing I can say to people, is just keep going.